When you finally leave corporate life, it can be tempting to think that the hard part is over. And yes, you have done a courageous thing. You've made a bold move, you've chosen freedom, you've finally said no to something that didn't fit. So celebrate that. But what I've learned and what I see with my clients all the time is that leaving corporate is only the first step in a new direction. The real pivot begins when you start building something new. Because without intention, your new work life can start to look a lot like the system you just left. If your career looks great on paper but feels wrong in your bones, you're not alone. Welcome to From Corporate to Calling, your lifeline into meaningful work. I'm Alisa Murphy, a regenerative business mentor and former startup CEO who walked away from corporate systems to create work that brings life. Each week, I share stories, reflections, and provocations to help you recognize the signs of burnout and make a career change with purpose. If work looks good but feels wrong, this is your invitation to get out of corporate and into your calling. I often hear people talking about being at a point of transition in their career or wanting to make a pivot. Supporting people through this process and doing that through a regenerative lens is what I do. But let's take a closer look at the word pivot because it throws up some interesting definitions. In business, pivoting means completely changing the basis upon which you operate. And that's exactly what a regenerative career transition really is. You're shifting out of a system built on extraction and exhaustion and into one built on life, restoration, and reciprocity. You're not just changing what you do, you're changing how you do it and your whole relationship with work in the process. But pivot has another meaning. It can mean turning around an axis, spinning around a central point again and again. And I see that happen too. People leave corporate but keep the same patterns at the center. The overworking, the self-doubt, the fear of not doing enough. So if you are at a point of transition, if you are taking that leap or thinking about it, I want that to be the transformational kind, not the one that just spins you around in circles. Today, we're going to talk about what it takes to pivot with purpose. I'm going to share with you the story of a client that I just started working with this morning that shows how clarity, boundaries, and courage can turn that brave decision into a sustainable one. I'll talk you through how she found herself spinning around just a few months after setting up her own business, the exact steps we took together to get her back on track for a long-term transition, and how you can put those methods into practice. So this client that I'm talking about chose to take voluntary redundancy earlier this year, and she really smartly used that as an opportunity to set up her own holistic wellness business, something that she'd trained in years ago and really loved, but had always kind of pushed to the side and never really taken seriously. And that was a courageous move. But within months, she was feeling overwhelmed. Her confidence, which had always been something she'd struggled with, had plummeted, her boundaries were blurred, and one of the most important things that she'd left corporate for, which was more time with her kids, was starting to slip away again. So she had pivoted in form, but not in foundation. Here's what we worked on and what you can take from it to put towards your purposeful transition. First of all, you need to know why you left. You didn't leave by accident. You made a strategic decision. Name those reasons clearly for yourself because they're actually the foundation of your business. So my client this morning, she didn't just randomly respond to this opportunity for voluntary redundancy. There were good reasons behind why she took that decision. She was finding the work quite repetitive. She didn't feel like there were opportunities for her to advance. She didn't actually really feel like the field that she had found herself in was one that she'd consciously chosen. She just kind of floated into it. So she made a strategic decision, but she quite quickly forgot about those reasons. And so this kind of temptation came up to get back on the job boards and think, maybe I need to go back into a similar field, but a different organization. And even as she was putting in all the hard work and investment of starting up her own business, she was sneaking onto the job boards and thinking, maybe I should just do the sensible thing and go back to a job. But that's because she lost sight of the reasons why she left. So make sure you are really, really clear on those. And the second thing I want you to think about is know why you started this new thing, this new business, this consultancy, this offer. If you're going to do something that bold and audacious, you want to make sure you've got really, really powerful reasons for doing so. Your business is rooted in purpose. You need to live and breathe that. You need to absolutely know what it is that you are getting up in the morning and going to work for. You need to put that in context and think about the kind of impact that you want to have. You need to think about the kind of relationship with work that you want to have. This is your why, and every step that you take should be focused on serving that purpose, and that will keep you away from those old patterns that are going to want to try and sneak in. The third thing that we looked at today was really encouraging my client to take a long-term view, and I very much encourage you to do the same. What you're doing here, you're not trying to solve a problem, paper over a crack, fix something in your career. It's not the same thing as going from one job to another and everything is kind of resolved within a few months. This is about building a regenerative work life that can serve you well into your old age if you choose it to. Really let yourself think that long term, because it shifts your focus away from comparison. My client kept looking at other people doing similar businesses thinking, well, I'm not there yet, and they keep talking about I've had this many clients or hit this kind of figure month, and that was actually a really destructive pattern that she was in. But it was because she was focused on the short term. She was thinking about where I need my income to be next month or how many clients I want to get by the end of the year. She wasn't thinking, how do I build a business that is going to allow me to be extremely present throughout my children's, throughout their childhood, as they grow up, as they go through the schooling system. How can I really maximize that time and really be there for them? How can I find work that supports me, as I go through personal changes and deal with all the kind of things that life throws at us? How can I make this work that I'm going to continue to get joy and satisfaction from year after year after year? Can you see how that's such a different way of thinking about this change that you're making? This is not the next step on your CV. This is creating something that is going to serve you for years and years to come. The fourth thing that we looked at today, and this is something that I always do when I start working with a client early on, I encourage them to think about how they want work to feel. And it may well be that you have never asked yourself that kind of question, because it's not really something that we're often encouraged to think about. But I really want you to think about that now. How do you want work to feel? That might sound something like, I want it to feel in balance with the other priorities in my life. I want to feel calm and energized at the same time. I want to feel passionate but not completely overwhelmed by opportunity or obligation. Really think about that core of how you want to feel, and then start translating that into kind of practical considerations. So things like how many hours you are going to dedicate to your work. What are those other priorities that need to be in balance with your work, and how can you design things in such a way that those needs are met? Start designing consciously right now, right at the beginning, because I promise you, if you don't, you will default back to that corporate conditioning. And you know what that means. It means working every hour God sends. It means thinking about work even when you're not actually working. It means putting family time on the back burner because there's a project you have to finish or a client you want to reply to. Don't go back to that. Be really conscious about this from the beginning, and you can create work that feels the way that you want it to feel. So we started with that with my client, and then that leads into the next step, which is to set really firm boundaries that protect that design. So my client and I quickly identified that boundaries was a really key issue, and it often is with people who have chosen to pursue a meaningful business of their own. Because when you are doing passion-led work, when you are doing work that responds to really significant challenges in the world around us, there can be this feeling that you are just so grateful to have the opportunity to do work that is meaningful to you, that you care about, or that the scale of the problem is so big that you can't possibly do something as selfish as rest or enjoy yourself along the way. And that really does not help us. Boundaries are how you build a resilient long-term business, and you've got to get those right from the beginning. If you can set firm boundaries now, those are going to serve you into that future that we were talking about before. So for my client today, that looked like things like not negotiating on her pricing. She'd set pricing that was just about acceptable to her nervous system for now. For me, it was a little bit low, but she felt comfortable with it. Fine, that's a great place to start, but she needed to stick to that pricing and not give in to the temptation to negotiate or offer discounts or even refunds. She needed to be really strong on her pricing. The second thing was some process. She was finding that she was allowing people to book or ask her questions just all over the place, ad hoc, doing it the weekend, letting her kids see her stuck head in her phone trying to get these things sorted. She had a system that was automated, that was really efficient and clear, that did all that for her. And one of the boundaries she needed to take was to use the processes that she put in place. And the third thing was being really boundaried with her time. So, she is in holistic wellness, so she has a variety of services that she offers, knowing this is the time that I deliver this service and I don't go over that time. And these are the hours that I'm working, and I don't constantly let myself just, do a little bit more marketing, check in on some clients outside of those hours. Setting those boundaries, which is setting the foundations that are going to allow you to create a really resilient business. And then the final thing that we talked about, which I think will almost certainly be helpful for everybody listening, is to make this transition in community. I cannot think of a single client that hasn't experienced loneliness on their journey. It is a lonely thing to do, to step out of a corporate system where the majority are, where there's a very strong sense of belonging, even if it's an uncomfortable belonging. There's a system and a structure and an organization that works and that holds you and contains you. It is completely different when you are stepping out on your own, where you are responsible, where you take all of the decisions, where the buck stops with you, where there is no one to turn to when you just need someone to hear you out, you need a second opinion, you need advice. That's a really difficult place to be in. I know, because I made that mistake myself. Back when I was an entrepreneur, I did it on my own for far, far too long. And one of the best things that I did was start to get people around me who were in a similar position, or who were just friendly ears, who were willing for me to pick up the phone and just be like, look, I need to talk this thing through with you. Getting a business coach was absolutely transformational for me. I know you might think, of course you're saying that, Alisa, because you're a coach, but let me tell you, back then I did not have the respect for coaching that I had today. I never ever thought I would hire a coach. I remember my eyes watering when my amazing coach Rick told me how much he charged a month, and it was worth every single penny. It transformed my business, and it transformed the experience for me of being in my business, because I had someone I could talk to and a space where I could share what was going on for me in absolute safety. It's an absolute game changer to have community around you, and there are lots of different ways that you can do that, from like local groups, online groups, peers, mentors, coaching, lots of different things that you can try. And it's so important, because when you share your progress with people who understand what you're going through, the challenges, they might not be building, they're almost certainly not going to be building exactly the same kind of business, but they are going through the same process. And it just makes all of those challenges easier to move through. This is something that I have learned is really, really important for my clients. Once they stop building in isolation, they start moving faster with more clarity and confidence. And it's one of the key drivers behind why I created the Meaningful Business Incubator, which is a space where you can build the next chapter of your career surrounded by other people who are doing exactly the same thing. It's a 6-month program where we turn regenerative principles into practical business design, where clarity meets structure, courage becomes creation, and we match the inner work with external practicalities. So if you find yourself ready for that kind of pivot, the kind that changes everything, the Meaningful Business Incubator could be your next step. You can learn more or book a call with me via the link in the show notes, or send me an email. As always, it's Alisa, ALISA, @regenerativeworklife.com. And remember, leaving corporate was your first act of courage. But the real long-term, life-changing work begins when you decide what comes next, and then build that in a way that truly fits who you are and the life you want to live. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week. If this episode of From Corporate to Calling was helpful or inspiring, follow the show so you don't miss an episode. And if you know someone who's questioning their career, send them this podcast. Lifelines are meant to be shared. Remember, you don't have to tolerate burnout or misalignment. You can redirect your skills into meaningful work that brings back life to you and to the world around you.